Hello everyone. I want to dedicate this class in honor of Penina, the daughter of Mordechai, who just passed just this week. And in honor of this learning, and her the merit of her soul, may that be a great merit to her, and as well as a merit to her family and all of us here. Talking about souls, most of us are so immersed in the world and life that we live that we usually don't see anything outside of our small perimeter, which means the here and now and the immediate needs and the instant gratification and anything else that distracts or seduces or attracts us is what most of us are driven by. We're sensory creatures, as they say. We're social animals, stimulated all the time today, overstimulated. Our senses of sight and sound and taste, touch and smell, and that dominates and consumes our lives. It takes usually some type of, hopefully only in the positive way, but often it's in a negative way, some shock, some trauma, something different to shake us out of our reverie and of our sleep, and to recognize there's more than just the immediate surface level, ground level perspective that we are so accustomed to. But even when we know what I've just said, and we all will acknowledge it, that still doesn't mean that we see the bigger picture. And we are consumed and affected by the immediate. And the challenge that has always been of all people, especially thinking people, whether it's philosophers or poets or romantics or scholars or mystics, it's always been the challenge is how do you maintain the bigger picture while you have to live life day to day with all its tediousness and the immediate needs of survival. Essentially, another way of putting it is how to balance survival and transcendence. Survival we're all quite familiar with, and that's basically our basic needs, whether it's needs of food, shelter, clothing, companionship, love, sexuality, and the other needs that we define. Some are necessities and some we think are necessities. That's survival level. And then there's a whole other dimension that the healthy, restless soul doesn't let us be at peace just with survival. And it causes this angst, a sense of hunger or thirst for something more. And that more is satisfied in many different ways, some healthy, and if we don't find healthy outlets, they're unhealthy outlets. We'll do whatever it takes to relieve ourselves of what's called existential loneliness, the pressures of going beyond just living the minimum survival level life. And here again we have all kinds of different ways that are beyond just needs. It includes also obviously love, music, art, travel, religion, spirituality, different hobbies or other interests that help us somewhat, as I said, relieve the pressure, the tension, relieve the mediocrity of a monotonous life. And we all have this battle, the ability to try to balance the two. Often what we do most is compartmentalize. And we live most of our lives in the survival and immediate mode that I began with. And from time to time, we find those outlets, whether it's weekends or vacations or holidays, or just when you just need to get out of it all, and so on. Even Manhattan, New York City, on a very geographical and topographical level, you see it. The city was all man-made, that you see right now. Everything is of concrete, all man-made objects. Nature has basically been eradicated from this place. Yes, we've left a little room but among the concrete, we left a little hole for a tree to be planted, so it gives the semblance of some human nature. But interesting, when the city planners built this, Robert Moses and others, Central Park, right, is a seemingly natural place. But the truth is the whole Manhattan was one Central Park. It wasn't called Central Park. It wasn't a park. It was what nature was about. And human beings tamed elements. Not only do we tame the elements, we basically eradicated the elements to leave room for our world of concrete and glass and metal. But we've left space because we need. Why they find that you need to make a park, and the same thing in Brooklyn Prospect Park is the same idea, because a park is symbolic of getting away from the rush hour, getting away from the marketplace, from the busyness of the everyday life. So you go to the park, walk in the park, trees, birds, water, etc., etc. And you see this every day. You see people, how they escape. That's just a small example of how urban life looks like. When you spend your time, I'm a hardcore New Yorker, you spend your time in a place that is completely natural, it's almost like it's a novelty. It's unnatural for someone who's become addicted to the habit of basically processed life, processed foods and processed life. So this challenge is a very deep one, to the point that we don't even really necessarily see the problem, because we're so accustomed to our habits and routines that we just deal with it when it comes. But sorry?
You can leave a window?
Yeah, why not?
I already opened that one.
I need a little relief. We need a little relief from this pressure, from this gas, what is it called? Greenhouse. But this issue lies at the heart, you can say, of all of Judaism, of all of Torah, because it's really any truthful person with integrity looking for deeper meaning, and does not let themselves get seduced and hypnotized by the distractions and by survival, deals with this in a very direct way. As I said, unfortunately, children live in the natural world. Then they're forced to go into our artificial adult world, and then they have to struggle with this issue as well. And if you really want to put it as a general formula, you can say almost every dissonance, any dichotomy that we face, is essentially at the core. You can trace it to this battle between two parts of our lives: the survival, the here and now, the immediate, whatever man-made institutions control our lives, and the natural need for something beyond. The truth is, the latter is really the real us. The other is the superimposed, but it's been turned around, where the glove is far more important to our lives than the hand. The packaging is far more important than what's inside. And as profound as we may think we are, all of us are affected by that. It's the core of marketing, the core of packaging, and so on. I'm not suggesting packages shouldn't look nice, but you could basically sell a nice package with very little substance inside to most people, including people who pride themselves into thinking they're quality people. Because that's the world in which we live, and the seduction of our senses is not difficult to achieve. It's happening all the time, to the point we're not even aware of it. And this is something that concerns the Torah from the outset, because it's really about the search for truth, the search for really finding a true inner place, and seeing, as some mystics put it, that not that we live in a physical world and having a spiritual journey, we are spirits on a physical journey. In other words, we're naturally spirits, not physical entities, and spirits that take a physical journey. So it's appropriate to what I began with, the memory of a soul that moves on, because that soul goes back to a place where spirit dominates, whereas we are trapped in our box where matter dominates. And with that said, it's a central theme of this week's chapter as well, and hence we titled it based on a verse in the book of Exodus, chapter what chapter are we? 33, verse 30 through 20, where Moses asks God, and I'll soon give some background to the whole story here. Moses asks God, Hareini nochvedecha, show me your glory, show me your face. And God responds, I cannot show you my face. No human being, no person can see my face and live. And that's the title of this class. No person can see my face and live. How much do we truly perceive? What do we really know about reality? And the context of it is both fascinating and also cryptic and mysterious. But as we shall see, hopefully, that this contains tremendous relevant lessons to our lives right here, right now, though this happened so many thousands of years ago. So the context of the story is as follows. One of my most favorite chapters, in a way, if one can say that. It's also the basis of the book 60 Days that is connected to the high holidays. Even though now is not the high holiday season, we're actually going to Passover, 6 months away from the high holidays, yet the story here is very much connected to the Jewish calendar. So the story goes like this. We all know that the Bible basically is the story, the first book of the Bible, Genesis, is the story from beginning of creation, beginning of time, Adam, through 25 generations. From Adam all the way to Jacob and his sons, and the book of Genesis concludes with the death of Jacob and his children. The book of Exodus, it begins a whole new chapter of the bondage, the exile, and the slavery of the Jews on the hands of the Egyptians. Then the Exodus, their freedom from that. Their arrival at Sinai and receiving the mandate, the divine mandate called the Torah. The building of the Mishkan. And the rest of the Bible, from the rest of the Torah, from the second book all the way through the fifth last book, all takes a span of 40 years. 40 years from leaving Egypt till the day they arrive, after 40 years wandering in the wilderness at the eastern border of Israel, the eastern shore of the Jordan River. And with that concludes the book of the Torah, the 5 books, where Moses passes away on that eastern shore. So everything in between, except the first book, is all those 40 years. The first book covers a span of close to 2,000 years. That's not for now, just to put things into context. So we know the Jews leave Egypt. They count 49 days, which is the counting of the Omer, which we replicate and we recreate every year, the second day of Passover. And the 50th day, after 49 days, the 50th day after they leave Egypt, they receive Mount Sinai, the Torah. And this is what we read in the previous chapters. After that, they receive the commandment to build the Mishkan, the temple. But something happens right after the receiving of the Torah that is a tragedy. Moses on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights comes down to find out, or he already heard up in heaven, God shared with him that the Jews had built a golden calf, an idol. They had just heard, do not build idols, do not worship false gods, and they built a false god. They built a golden idol. Moses, of course, comes down and has to deal with this. He shatters the tablets he received from God, and he obviously reprimands the people and marches back up on the mountain to ask for forgiveness for the people. And this begins a whole journey. After 40 days on the mountain for receiving the Torah, now he begins begging for forgiveness. And that's the context of this week's chapter. Moses is on the mountain now, speaking to God, begging him, essentially trying to reconcile, like a mediator between spouses, between the divine and between the people, God and the Jews, to try to find some way to reconcile between them after such betrayal. And in intimate detail, and I use the emphasis of the word intimate, because it's literally Moses speaking to God like in a very intimate, personal way, trying to reconcile and find a way to dig deeper into God's so-called psyche and connect him with the love that he once had for his people, which now has been severed, at least on a conscious level. Just to tell you the rest of the context of the story, Moses spends 40 days doing that unsuccessfully. And he comes down and goes back a third time for 40 days, and this time he returns on Yom Kippur, which is all told in this week's chapter, finally achieves forgiveness, and that's why Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year, because it's the birthday, the birth of hope, the birth of forgiveness, the birth of the ability to reconcile, to fix something after it's been broken. And the entire holiday season actually begins with Passover, leaving Egypt, that's freedom. 50 days later, they receive the Torah. 40 days later, Moses comes down, they had built a golden calf, so we have 50 and 40. 40 days later, he comes down unsuccessful. 40 days later again. So basically 50, 120. Yom Kippur is 170 days from the second day of Passover. That's how it is. 49, 50 days till Shavuos. 40, 40, 40. From there, 120. Do the math. And it all begins in a cycle, which is another story which I've discussed many times. The harmony, the elegance, you can say, the poetry of the Jewish calendar. It's all one continuum. But it's really the story of our lives. What's the story? The story is things begin good, going well. We find love, we find a connection, we find freedom. And then we mess up, and there's a betrayal. There's a loss. Something is broken. Everyone goes through this cycle. Question is what happens next. So while things are going well, most people can handle that until things don't go well. That's another question where they actually handle when things are going well. That's another story. It's not always so easy to do that. They shouldn't have preventing it from breaking in the first place. But we'll all go through a break, through a loss, through a failure, through a setback, through a betrayal, somewhere down the line. The question is now, what you're made of is tested in such under duress. They call aplomb. The dignity under duress. What happens when something fails? So many of us, when something fails, we blame everybody except ourselves. That's one approach you can take. Another is that you just go into denial and just simply refuse to acknowledge it. And we all have our mechanisms. I'm not going to go through the whole list of fancy and success and gimmicks that we use to deal with pain. Most of us cover up. We cause more problems to cover up the first problem. Instead of healing the infection, we create more problems. So symptoms lead to more symptoms. One problem leads to another problem, and it becomes till it's out of control. Well, Moses was a healthy soul. As soon as he saw a problem, he knew the Jews would have to be accountable. That was not an issue. But he marched right back up on the mountain. He didn't hesitate. He knew he better go and deal with it. And you can imagine, usually you wait till someone's anger abates, and so on. Now, obviously, I'm talking about God in a human fashion, though all this has to be applied without any anthropomorphism. But nevertheless, as a metaphor, it's an example for life as well. So, nevertheless, Moses goes right into the lion's den and confronts God. And the most fascinating dialogue, and I suggest anyone to read this chapter. Look what a man did in facing God and having to deal with a situation that he was not at fault. He was not even there. Yet he still took responsibility, because as a leader, even if you're not present, you're still responsible. And he begs, beseeches, does whatever it takes to create a reconciliation. And you see through a whole dialogue back and forth what he says, what God says, how God responds. And finally, as he's finally achieving and he is reaching into God's heart, and when God says to him, listen, go build another nation. They messed up. Let's deal with it. Let's find better people. Moses says, erase my name from this book if you're not going to forgive them. He puts himself on the line. He breaks the tablets. I mean, what greater desecration than that? For us, the effect is, for example, a Torah scroll, which doesn't come close to the sanctity of the tablets that God himself gave Moses. Torah scroll has one little blemish, or unfortunately by mistake falls down, it's considered a major tragedy. The burning of a scroll. And here Moses deliberately takes these holy tablets, shatters them. Everyone thinks he shattered them out of control. He got angry and he shattered them. No, it's not true. It was quite deliberate and was planned, because basically the whole tablets were the contract. And he was saying to God, I told them the contract, but they never signed it. I never delivered it. It was a way for him to protect his clients. He was a good attorney. He tore up the contract, basically. That's what Rashi says. So the efforts, the selfless efforts of putting himself on the line for people is itself a tremendous lesson in leadership, which again, here is not the focus of this class. I've discussed this in other classes. What I do want to focus is on a few verses where finally when Moses is reaching into God and God is having a experience where he sees that here's a man ready to do whatever it takes. He would not take no for an answer, basically. That was his level of commitment. Even for a people that made a very grave error, and it was quite intentional. It wasn't they misunderstood, they made a mistake. It was a deliberate, a very difficult challenge, and yet Moses was going to do whatever it takes. So then there's these few verses where he says to God, he says, Hareini nach vedacha. I'm reading now from that chapter where I said 33, now 18. If you're following along wherever you are, or you want to follow along later. And God responds to him, no, you cannot see my face. No man, no human being, no person can see me and live. And then he continues and says to Moses, stand here in this little crevice on the mountain. And he says, and I will remove my, how does he translate this? Chav Gimel. I will remove my hand. Basically, God will remove the cover. And says, and you will see my back, but then repeats, Upanai, my face you will not see. These few cryptic verses become the basis of literally hundreds and hundreds of pages, if not thousands, of understanding what is this dialogue about. So there are mystics that basically simply explain that this is the secret of reality. You cannot see it and live. Some people may have an issue with this, and look, William Blake. Was everything all right? William Blake writes that if we cleanse the doors of perception, everything will remain as it truly is, infinite. However, we are all trapped, not exact quote, but paraphrasing, that we are all trapped in our caverns. As I said earlier, are we able to really see the naked, pure, unadulterated reality and survive? It's a question that mystics have had at the beginning of time. And the challenge being, as one great scholar of mystic wrote, if I was him, if I knew him, I would be him. If I knew God, I would be God. So to maintain our so-called conscious and unique personalities, our individuality, requires a certain form of blindness, not to see it all. Because if you saw it all, there's no way you could remain intact in your little world. The Arizal's words are, as I discussed many times here, that the infinite divine light were all revealed, we would all be consumed in it, and you need to be concealed. Here's the classic example. If a brilliant teacher would just share and just pour everything out, it would confuse us. Things need to be concealed for us to be able to contain. We have to be spoon-fed, step by step by step. So this request of Moses to see God, God's response is very logical. You can't see me and live and be you. But that begs the question, so what? Moses was as wise as anyone, didn't understand that. Why did he ask? He understood quite well this principle. The finite cannot contain the infinite. And if it enters the infinite, the finite would be burned. It will lose itself. We've had examples of this. Some of the great souls and spirits in this last few generations, in every generation, but the ones that we're familiar with, people like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, I'm just using cultural examples, Jim Morrison, they all OD'd. And people wonder why, such geniuses, they're mid-20s, early 20s, because they had great energy and they had nowhere to put it. And they simply could not sustain that level of a high and come back to tell about it. And at some point you just blow out your brains. I've heard this from many people who were spiritually oriented, dropped a lot of acid, experiment with all types of transcendental experiences, and everyone down to the individual will all say, in many cases it was quite dangerous. Some of my friends basically burned their brains out, some physically and some emotionally and psychologically. It's very dangerous to tamper with entering into a world that has no shades, that has no veils and filters. It's like looking at the sun without a filter. The same thing when it comes to the world of spirit, without filters, can be quite dangerous, and with Magod, you can't sustain yourself. And yet Moses asks. And what is this response God is giving Moses? He's saying to him, okay, you know what? I'll show you my back, but my face you cannot see. What is the back? What did he see? What he did not see? And why rub it in? God already said to him, no man can see me and live. No person can see me and live. And he said it earlier as well. So why again? He says, I will remove kapai, my veil, or my hand that's shielding me, and you'll see my back, and he rubs it in, but my face you won't see. Repeats it again. And above all, why are we told this whole story? If Moses didn't get what he asked for, what's the point of repeating it? I'm sure many things probably happened in those days that were not documented. Here we have to tell us a story that didn't get fulfilled. I mean, what's the point? Is this a virtue of Moses? There's so much that Moses did get achieved. He was able to gain Salachti Kidvarecha, what we say Yom Kippur. He was able to regain hope, forgiveness. These are great things that Moses achieved. Why do we have to focus on this? But as we shall soon see, In these few sentences, you have the great secrets to life, to relationships, to understanding ourselves, obviously also understanding God or relating to God. Because that's the big question. Let's bring it back to on a personal level, because it's easier to talk about than talk about God, which is far more difficult. Question is asked as well in a relationship. There are people who tell me and say, I don't want to live alone. But on the other hand, I don't want to be bound with someone else either. So they say you can't live with him, or you can't live with her, and you can't live without her or him. So what is this type of trap we're in? That you can't win either way. If you don't have anyone in your life, it's very lonely. It can be very daunting, very challenging. A lot of our own potential can be limited. The anguish, all that comes with being alone. On the other hand, when you have another person in your life, there's a lot of beauty on one hand, but there's also you have to deal with things. That person is not you. And if they become an extension of you, is that a healthy thing? They're not you, and they have different opinions, and you have to reckon with them. And you can't just go where you like, when you like, and so on. It becomes a whole second party that you have to address. So yes, people have tried to maneuver and have the best of both worlds. Take without giving. But I don't have to go into elaboration that's not exactly going to bode well for a true relationship. Some people can get away with it. Maybe both parties are dysfunctional. This one needs to give, this one takes, and that's it, and they're both satisfied. That doesn't mean it's yielding good results. It just means that they're able to, as I said earlier, deal with the immediate here and now, so things are working for now. Can't see that lasting very long. So here's the question. Can two people who have different distinct identities and individuality, can they really become one? Or is it more like a business agreement where you negotiate, give and take? I'll compromise a little, you compromise a little, here, give and take, and then we maneuver. We figure out how to dance together. Another way of putting it, or maybe a different question altogether, is how deep can a connection between two people get? At the end of the day, we all know that there is a very quiet, lonely place in each of us that no other person ever enters. Even if we want them to enter, they never can really see it away from the way we see it, from the inside out. We can experience somebody, besides ourselves, other people we experience from the outside in. If you really love someone, you travel as much as you can to go in. But you never really feel it the way a person sees it themselves. So can two people really connect on that most inner, intimate level? So you can make the argument, like we learn in this verse, that no one can see my face and live. Just like we say about God, we could also say about the essential soul of every human being, that if you saw my deepest innermost sense, you would not be you anymore. You cannot live, meaning you can't retain your individuality if you enter into my deepest place, and vice versa. So the only way we really can connect to each other would be, you're not really seeing the face, you're seeing the back, you're seeing a reflection, you're seeing a manifestation. So if it's a stranger and someone you don't care about, you don't even see anything from the inside. If it's someone you love and care about, you make an effort to go as deep as you can, but there's always a place where, a dead end. There's always a place where people cannot, hypothetically, people can necessarily enter. Which has been a source of frustration. How many love songs, poems, books, novels, statements have been declared by lovers who feel that lack of that frustration of not really being able to fully connect with another. There's some point where there's a distinction and separation between. And this is not necessarily because people have defenses up and not willing to share. It's because, as I discussed last week and many times here, there's some places that just simply are not expressible. When a person is in deep pain, for example, even if someone loves you, they love you, they'll basically be there with you. But to say, tell me what you feel like, often is very frustrating because the person can't tell you. They can't really express it. You love them, you just have to empathize and try to feel with them and for them, and ultimately, hopefully, you get somewhere. So the real question is, how deep can our connections really go? And that's what Moses is dealing with here. He wasn't just dealing with a nice philosophical discussion, can I see your face, not see your face. It comes down to how high and deep can we go and still maintain our person, our individuality. So the analogy usually for a very healthy love is like two circles. If one person is like this circle, a man is this, and the woman is this, they both live their lives, they have their circles, they develop their lives in their childhood, they become adults, then they meet. So they meet, the two circles meet. What happens when they meet? So they begin to interact. Then they find places they overlap. They really bond. So healthy? What happens when it's healthy? So it becomes like this. It becomes like a chain. Two circles, they're still complete, but now they have joined together, and they're more than just the sum of the parts. What happens when it's not healthy? What's not healthy is one will be swallowed by the other. Or the other way around. The second will be swallowed by the first, or the first by the second. The Kotzker Rebbe's words, he puts it this way when it comes to relationships. He says, if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am not and you are not. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, I am and you are. That's the poetic version. One in simple terms, more the mechanical version, the technical version, the specs, as they say. It goes like this. It goes that if my identity is defined by proximity to your identity, in other words, I don't know who I am unless I see you, so I know what not to be, or then I never will be. And if you identify yourself by me, then it's just the blind leading the blind, and you will never be. But if I am I because I am I, it's self-initiated. I have a self, an identity outside of you. And you have an identity outside of me, then we're both intact, and then when we meet, there can be this total joining. So you need intact individuals. Or if not, they will not be able to truly connect without compromising one another. So the question, in a way, to rephrase what it says here, is how deep can this connection go? And Moses was testing the boundaries because that's exactly what happened. As long as everything was going well, he received the Torah, there was no golden calf, no betrayal, fine. There's a connection, and now we hope that the relationship will build, and the Jews and the people and God will work on their relationship, and they'll go into a bright future forever after. Problem was, 39 days after the marriage, or after the initial stage of the marriage, there was betrayal. There's a break. So now it can go in two directions. Either the whole thing severs, and that's it, it's over with. Or you dig deeper, and you take the challenge as an opportunity to see what are we really made of. Because now we can't just rely on cruise control or an automatic pilot. Now we need to dig deeper to really be able to create a connection. So Moses' discussion with God, at least this section that we're addressing here, is how deep is this connection? Because God, as we always talk about God, and I've said it many times again and again, is just a word. It really means nothing until you define what you mean by God. The word God is often actually filled with stereotypes, with negative stuff. It's been misused, abused, hijacked in all different ways. So the truth is, the word God is often not a great word to use because it misleads us. It feeds into our stereotypes, and then we're talking about that God, that. So I'd rather not even use the word God. I'd rather use the word reality, the higher and true reality. That if you're able to go down the rabbit hole all the way to the core, what would you hit? What would you hit? So in fairy tale nursery books, they say, how does the earth hang in the air? So it says the earth doesn't hang, it's on the back of an elephant. Okay, and what's the elephant standing on? On the back of a turtle. And the turtle, the back of a whale. You have these cartoons or whatever. So you got yourself an earth that's standing on an elephant, on top of a turtle and a whale. You can go 1,000 levels, as many as you want. But one step you always have to deal with is, who's standing at the bottom? And that's where science stops. Like a scientist wisely told me, he said, all I can do is take you to the first ball of gas. Before that, I can't take you because that's outside of our realm. But who put the first ball of gas? So just pushing it off, it just doesn't answer the first step. The Chelem story, where Chelem was this town of fools, and this old shtetl. And after years, they decided, one guy goes out to the big town, and he sees, some new technologies. He sees an engine, a locomotive, a train. And he's like amazed. What's he amazed? Here you have a bunch of cars, and they're moving without a horse pulling them, or a donkey. comes back to his town. He says, you know what's going on out there? It's a miracle. There's these cars that just move. They said, well, that's impossible. What makes them move? So he says, behind the first car is a second car that pushes it. That's how he understood it. How else? What's pushing the second car? They say a third car. And what's pushing the third car, a fourth car? Okay, go how many cars do you like? 10 cars, 20 cars. And who's pushing the last car? He says, that's a technicality. I forgot to ask that question. So we can answer many steps when you get to the bottom line is what's the core? You want to call that God? That's a good definition. I can't say it's an adequate definition because we don't believe in pantheism that God is nature and nature is God. God is nature, but nature is not God. So if you come to the core, you'll find God, but God has also more than the core. In other words, there's more to go than what you hit. But at least, what the Chassidus calls mamala kalam, if you're able to get to the core of reality as we know it, you also get to a divine reality. And then there's a whole divine reality that's beyond that as well. It's another discussion. Also relevant here. So if you look at God in that sense, so God is the core reality of who you are. The real you is godly, basically. I didn't say God because, as I said, God is us, but doesn't mean we're God. So the real you is a divine force that is a form of energy, but not energy as we know it as electricity or nuclear energy or atomic energy or other types of waves that we're familiar with. It's a form of soulful energy. And you know when it's touched? When you sing a song. When you have a moment of a soulful moment. What's happening? What's happening is that reality is being stimulated. And that reality is not stimulated by material things. Someone can shake you physically and they will not shake your soul. Someone cannot even touch you and play a right song and your soul can move who knows how far. It's a different reality. It's called a soulful reality, a sublime reality. Whatever words you want to use. My goal here is not really to give it a label. It's not the opposite. I'm trying to find words that resonate and give it any label you like. Whatever label you like. You want to call this love? Call it love. It's also fine with me. Love equals God. God equals love. That's a cool definition. So it's essentially going into the reality. As I said before, what is reality? What we see with our eyes, ears, taste, touch, and smell? No. Because there's so much that is real that is not captured by those tools. You can't see love. You can't see an idea. You can't see pain. Yet it's absolutely real. I would say pain, love, ideas, and so on are more real than things we do see with our eyes. So we need other tools. Ears, taste, touch, and smell all will give you certain taste of things, a touch of things, a smell of things, but there's always something that their senses cannot fathom, cannot contain. So we then go into the world of the soulful tools. Tools, love feels love. If you didn't know what love was, if you never experienced it, you had no idea, there's no way you would understand it or relate to it. So we have another set of tools which are far more complicated that help us understand or perceive, experience deeper realities. The question is, how far does this go? Love is no question one of the best examples, and you could say why God gave us love was a way for us to relate to God, because if we didn't have love, we would never transcend our material beings and have a taste of something beyond us. As a matter of fact, if you really want to put it in blunt terms, Hasidic thought says that every sublime experience was given to us simply as a reminder of a higher reality. Music, art, all the transcendent experiences we have. Flowers, romance, love, sexuality. Anything that is not of the material, corporeal, here and now, is a reminder. It's like a message from another place. Unfortunately, we try to fit that message into our reality and we think, I'm here and that's just some type of novelty. The truth is that's where it's at, and it's allowing you to have a taste of something that is far more real, which is why it resonates and touches us so deeply. Going back to what I said, we're not physical beings having spiritual experiences, we're spiritual entities having physical experiences. But we're not accustomed to thinking of ourselves that way. We don't live that way. So the question is, how deep does it go? And that's what Moses was forced and challenged to deal with, because he knew that if he's going to create a reconciliation and a renewed love between two forces, two entities, the core entity, core reality, aka God, And the reality on the outside, the people, he would have to dig deeper into both of them. And his first step was to dig deeper into the divine reality. He says, I need to find out what you really like, and I want to see what you're like on the deepest level. It's like, think of the healing. When a person is healthy, they're healthy. We have a normal immune system is working well, everything is going. God forbid if something attacks your body, or no one should be attacked this way, but God forbid hypothetically a body is attacked, then a good doctors have to find the resilience and resourcefulness of the body in a deeper way. They have to stimulate deeper healing agents that unusually would not be needed. And look at the body, even without medical intervention. The body itself digs deeper in order to compensate for the lack of something. It doesn't need no training. It's automatic. Because as soon as there's crisis, as soon as something's not working, you have to dig deeper to find better resources to help healing. That's why our heart beats fast when we run. That's why we sweat. These are all essential reactions that are compensating for an imbalance. And it's a healthy compensation. Every disease, every illness will trigger all kinds of reactions inside of us because the body is fighting to try to compensate. Obviously, medical intervention, exercise, nutrition, other things that we use are methods that help accelerate it, that help focus, that help be a catalyst. They don't heal per se. What we're doing is they're helping the body strengthen itself in certain areas so it should be able to fight the battle well. Psychologically, it's also true. Two people love each other and then something happened between them. So yes, they could just end right there. Or they can both dig deeper or have a mediator like a Moses that reaches deeper into both of them and finds resources that initially were not necessarily there. Or they were there rather. They were not necessarily visible and not necessarily, it wasn't necessary to go there. And now we need to go. We need to fall back on plan B, so to speak, to go deeper. What did God say to Moses? I created the world in created the system of the world, cause and effect. A person puts his hand in fire, what do you want me to do? They will get burned. The people put themselves into fire. They built a golden calf. They severed the relationship. I didn't do anything. They basically brought upon themselves their own downfall. The connected with me gives them life. They disconnected themselves from their own source of life. It's like someone who's, God forbid, suffocates himself. What was Moses' response? Moses' response says, yes, it's correct. You created a world of cause and effect, and when people do things, there are consequences. But you're God. You put that system in place. I want you to go back into the source code, to the engine room, and I want to change something, dig deeper, and give me a way to resolve this. And God said, we can't go backwards. Time goes forward. You can't change the past. Mistake was made. But Moses knew that he could. And he knew what God was. And he, in a sense, forced God's hand because he kept insisting and saying we could go there. And his mere love for the people evoked Kavyachol, we say, because God, again, it's not anthropomorphic, but that reality evoked compassion, and God reveals to Moses the 13 Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, the 13 attributes of compassion. He says, whenever you will be in trouble, use these 13 attributes, which is why we invoke them in the month of Elul, and especially in Yom Kippur many times over. Think of it like a parent and a child. And the parent says to the child, look, if you ever get lost, and you can't find me, and I can't find you, and you don't know what to do, call out with this special voice, and I'll hear it. I'll know your voice. God revealed to Moses a secret that only was a result of the problem, because now we needed something deeper. When Moses saw he was able to achieve that, he wanted even more than that, because he was going to go for it all. So he asked God, how far can we go? I want to have it all. I want to connect and see your face. I want to know what it looks like to look at the universe through God's eyes. Which is it's a very dangerous place to go. Moses knew that very well. But he also knew God and saying, you are God, you can figure out a way we can do that as well. They say about one of the Rebbes, I'm not sure which one, the Belzer, one of the Rebbes that lost, maybe the Klausenberg, I don't think it was one of these Rebbes that lost an entire family, and a wife, family, and children, the Holocaust. And you can imagine, he rebuilt his life afterwards, but his things don't go away. And there was a reporter came to see him and said to him, you're a man of God. You dedicate your whole life to God. Why don't you ask God why he did this? And God may not tell anyone else, but you will tell. His answer is absolutely unbelievable. You know what his answer was? He said, if God wanted to tell me, I wouldn't want to hear it. That's what he said. That's what a man of God says. What's he saying? Or in the words you can say of another expression that I heard recently, I don't know, it was Rabbi Nachman, somebody said this, he says, personally, I prefer a God I don't understand than a God that thinks like me. That's what he said. Now I don't know how many of you would say that. Maybe you think you really think well and you'd like God to think like you. Fine, so be it. But what this Rebbe was saying was a very profound and deep thing. He was saying, I don't want God to explain to me how 1.5 million innocent children were gassed, and why 6 million Jews and all the other tragedy, the whole upheaval and everything, all the inhumane behavior. I mean, there's no words for it. I don't want to hear an explanation. I'd rather remain a mystery, and that's that. What am I going to get an explanation now? Wasn't it bad enough? So he's going to give me an explanation. And obviously God did not provide an explanation, and maybe there is no explanation in human logic. What explanation could a human being fathom in that world? And I'm not going now into this discussion about the Holocaust and God. That's a whole other story. But the point was, Moses nevertheless did want to go there. He wanted to go into the innermost kishkas as humanly as possible. You created us, so we are part of you, he's saying to God. I want to see that part, that face. I want to see you in your fullest sense of the word. And yes, he wanted it and remain living, obviously. Now, the interesting thing, to go back a moment to that, the Talmud tells an interesting episode. The Talmud says, in this verse here, that God responds to Moses. This doesn't say, it's not written in the written Torah, but the oral Torah reads between the lines and interprets and says, God said to Moses, when Moses asked to see his face, God said, really? I once wanted to show you my face. And what you did then was cover your face. You didn't want to look. Back in the beginning of Exodus, when Moses is chosen by God to go redeem the people, he says, tell Pharaoh, let my people go and they shall serve me. So we all know the story of the burning bush. Moses was a shepherd. The sheep were grazing, and he saw from a distance a strange sight, a thorn bush burning. But the bush was not being consumed. And he realized there was a revelation. He came closer and realized it was of a divine. That's where God speaks to him for the first time. And when Moses saw that, he covered his face. So here's what the Talmud says, a very strange Talmud. The Talmud says, God says to Moses, when I wanted to show you my face, you didn't want to look. Now you want to see it, I'm not going to show it to you. The obvious question is, what is this, some type of childish game? Like, when you want, we humans, we're capable of this. Like when I wanted, you didn't want. Now when you want, I don't want. We do this. You've ever been guilty of that, Eleanor? Huh? We do this. But God, what is God playing around here? If he deserves to see it, show it to him. If not, not. What is the meaning of the Talmud? And the answer is very profound and lays inside the texts that we're reading here. God was saying, no, this wasn't tit for tat. He was saying, you want to see my face, it can't be on your terms. It's not when you want. You wake up, you want. It has to be by you not wanting it. Meaning, not on your terms, on my terms. When I wanted to show it to you on my terms, then you could see it. If you want it on your terms, and how you, in your capacity, then you cannot be there. Because then it's you, not me. So in other words, you want to connect with me, you have to give up something, but you still remain there, but you have to give up something. You have to give up that selfish in a way, that personal drive that you want it too much. You have to allow it to emerge and not try to acquire it. It's not an acquisition. It's an emergence. And requires a deep level of selflessness. So now the way this verse is read, so the Panim Yofis was a great scholar, student of the Maggid of Mezritch, writes that when it says God removed his cover, he removed his hand, it says you'll see my back but my face you'll not see. He says you're not supposed to read it that way. It says you will see my back, upanai, and my face. And then you make a comma. But my face you will see by lo yiro, by not looking. So in other words, there are things we see by looking, and there are things we see by not looking. This is the key to the whole story. Let's take there's an expression in Jewish philosophy, in the laws of logic. Basically how we deduce things. There's two ways you can deduce. One is called interpolation, one is called extrapolation. It's sometimes called direct deduction and sometimes indirect deduction. Direct deduction is you're given a bunch of facts that you can observe, or you're given items, you make order, and you come to a conclusion. You're given enough variables, enough data, and then you have to find the answer. You research and you come up with an answer. There are times that even if you have all the data in the world, you can't come to a direct answer, but you can come to indirect through like a process of elimination. Like you'd say, well, I've eliminated this possibility and this possibility, and there's only one option left. So you haven't deduced the option directly, you've indirectly deduced it. When things are less tangible, you need to have what's called Yediyas HaShlila instead of Yediyas HaChiyuv. Yediyas HaChiyuv means you have an understanding of it. We humans can relate to certain things very directly, but there are a lot of things we can't deal with directly. I've given this example many times for the human psyche, for the unconscious. Unconscious, by definition, is not deductible. That's not maybe a good word. No, deductible doesn't belong here. Deducible is the word I wanted to use. Why? Because it's unconscious. You say something to me from your conscious experience. You can say, I was walking down the street, I saw a beautiful sight, come, let's see it. I come and see it, yeah, and I share it with you. We're both looking at this beautiful sight. But if it's something that is not directly visible or directly perceptible, you need to use the Yediyas HaShlila, the negative. So let's take an example, a psychological example. I've used this example. So how does a person who's really trained, maybe you can sit and have a conversation with them, they'll see something that others don't see. They'll see something you don't even see about yourself. What is it they have? I mean, good, there's intuition, there's wisdom, experience, obviously. But it's more than that. How could they see something that's not seeable? Because if we're seeable, anybody can see it. Someone asks you, what's the color of your eyes? You could either look in the mirror or someone tells you. But if someone says to you, why do I have an anger streak? Why am I fearful? Why am I afraid of relationships, commitments, whatever? It's a whole different story. It's things you can't see. So how do people who are able to help and go there? The answer is through the extrapolation. And I'll give you an example. The example I'll give is, imagine an imaginary wall shrouded in darkness. Imaginary wall shrouded in darkness. And you cannot touch the wall. And you can't shine a light on it. So the question is there any way possible for you to get a sense of what this wall looks like? And you can't shine a light, there's no pictures, and you can't touch it. The answer is yes. You can take a ball and you can throw it against the wall. And you see how the ball bounces back. So you can't know what the wall looks like, but you can know how it bounces back. If it bounces back straight, you know the wall is straight. If it bounces back to the right, you know the wall must be indented. And you keep bouncing it enough times, you can get a picture almost as if you saw it. You can't say exactly, obviously, but through this extrapolation. So what is a good person? Just like a doctor. You say I have a little pain somewhere, God forbid. So the doctor feels the pain, this, isolates, and says it's not this, it's not that, and then says, okay, the possibilities are here and there. The doctor has the knowledge. The doctor cannot see what's inside there. Even if an X-ray could see, But let's say there's things even an X-ray cannot see or a CAT scan. The doctor will deduce through this process of elimination. Psychologically, someone who's trained and is sensitive and empathetic and wise, what they do is they talk to you, have a conversation. I've had this many times. You start talking, someone shares with you, this is my challenge. And you start going through what they call the usual suspects, right? Okay, this is your challenge. What were your parents like? What kind of earlier experiences did you have? What was your childhood like? There's a whole list that everyone knows, the list we go through. And what you're doing is really having a conversation, trying to elicit and see. Being you're more objective than the person themselves, you may see something the person can't see. And then you start talking, you start seeing, you get an area, okay, this looks to be a very sensitive area because the person has difficulty talking about it. And often you'll hear someone say, no, that's definitely not there, let's move on. So rest assured, it's probably right there. It's like a nerve. Like if someone's pressing, if they feel the nerve, that's where the pain is. That's the thing you don't want to be touched because it's very tender. Now obviously this has to be done with sensitivity. We're not talking about someone that's going on a full assault on another person's psyche. We're talking about a sensitive person. But that's how you identify. You see the areas of resistance. You see where a person doesn't want to talk about. You don't push it, but you start getting a sense where there's smoke, there's fire, as they say. So you're not seeing the unconscious, but you're getting a sense. You can get a sense of a person's entire childhood by what they talk about, what they don't talk about. Ask them, what about your mother? What about your father? You see always reactions. People will not have the same facial expression. They may hide it well, but it's different. And you learn things that way. So what about your siblings? What about this? What you're doing is throwing the ball on a dark wall and seeing how it bounces back. This is doable. Again, it needs training, it needs sensitivity. This isn't a game. Definitely not. It's a very serious thing because you're talking about a life. But that's how you identify. So the process of it means by not looking, you see it. By trying to look at it and say, no, I'm going to get a picture of it, you never see it. Because it's not about, you can't acquire it. It can emerge. The dark wall emerges. The unconscious emerges. It never is acquisition. It's not an acquisition. The conscious you can acquire to some extent. You share an idea, I get your idea. When you start using metaphor, and you start using music, and you start using sublime tools, what you get when I speak is not direct. What you get is something that emerges, and you say, I had an experience like that. I get it that way. You say, aha. What's aha? You're not ahaing what I said, you're ahaing inside of you. You're suddenly realizing, it's like an epiphany, and a realization that you weren't aware of a moment before. It's happened to you when you have like that aha moment. That means it was in there, it was like a dark wall, something bounced at it, so it like awoke. Instead of it being bought or acquired. So what God was telling Moses was, your request is I understand your request, and I would love to show you my face. But if you want to know how to do it, you can't do it by asking. You can't do it by wanting it too much. You have to let go, and then my face will emerge. My back, my reflection, you can experience more directly. You want to know if I have wisdom? I created you with wisdom, so you can imagine I also have wisdom. So we say in the Pasach Eliyah, in Tikkun Ezra, we say, Chakim v'lei b'chachmi yediyah. God is wise, but not with knowable wisdom. What does that mean? Which one is it? It's both. There's what you can experience through direct, and what you come to learn indirectly. Let's take this back to relationships. When two people truly love each other and want to connect on the deepest level, there's two aspects. There are things that they can know about each other. So good. People who love each other have confidence in each other, trust. They will share things they won't share with someone else. They'll share a feeling, they'll share a reaction. They'll say, today was a very horrible day. Today was a great day. I feel very vulnerable. This people share with people they trust. But then there's a point where some things we can't really share. Even with ourselves, we don't have the words for it. Does that mean the person that loves you cannot go there with you? Absolutely. But that requires a whole new level of selflessness. You have to remove your desire to want to be there. You almost have to pull away, and then it emerges. All true things emerge in that fashion. And that was the secret that God revealed to Moses. That yes, you can reach that level, and we can go to a place, into the engine room, into the source code, before all this happened, before this betrayal happened. But for you to reach into that place inside of me, you can't come with your conventional tools. You have to let go. The people have to let go. That's why Yom Kippur we fast. We are not immersed in the world. We do whatever we can to shed our so-called identities. Because you want to reach to a greater place, you have to let go of a lot of things. The key beautiful thing here is we're not talking about maintaining letting it go. Because we're not talking about annihilation. We're talking about being able to experience it. Then you can come back and tell about it. So, bottom line is, it's much more complicated. It's not just God saying, no person can see me and live. That's obvious. Obviously, you go into a fire, you can't live. If you suddenly open your eye, you're go too close to the sun, you'll burn up. Too close to the spirit, your body won't contain it. We say, Rotze without a shuv. The 4 people that went into the pardis, into the orchard, 3, 1 died from the spiritual intensity, 1 went mad, 1 became an apostate. Only 1 man was able to return. Why? Because nichnas b'shalom. He went in without himself. He went in peace, meaning he shed himself of his personality. His personality would have been intact. He would not have been able to take it either. He had to let go. You have Nadav and Avihu, the story in the Talmud, the Torah. They rush in and with all their passion and excitement into the temple for good reasons, out of love and ecstasy. First burnout, literally it says, foreign fire, they got burned and died. So you have constant stories of people being consumed by their own passion. Too much passion. I mean, to want to use an example, I want to qualify before I use this example, because I don't mean it I mean it in a very subtle and refined way. Not as many people may take it in a very so-called non-subtle way. Sexuality is like this. You want it too much and get too much of it, it'll end up consuming you. If the art is restraint, the art is knowing how to be humble in the experience. That you go into the Holy of Holies, not because you want it so much and because you're so hungry. Precisely because you're so hungry, that's when you have to even be more modest. Like the Alter Rebbe writes, I became diminished, I became humbled because of all the love that I received. These are true people who know when you're in that moment where you want it so much and have all the passion, that's the moment when you have to know how to let go. Not let go of the passion, let go of yourself. And then what comes back in return is a far deeper experience than when you get it on your terms. That's how it is. It's the secret of all real things in life. Because when you want it, and you got it on your terms, yeah, you may get something, but it's going to be confined to your terms. And every human being is immortal, and has finite terms. That's what God said to Moses. You want it on your terms, you're not going to have me. You're going to have you're going to fit it into your little box. I wanted to show it to you then on my terms. You want it now on my terms, you have to not look. So this is really, you could say, well, that's a paragraph. How could it be? I'm so hungry, I want it. I'm about to see God's face. I'm about to see the deepest experience. I mean, this is the time I want to run. No, this is the time where you should pause and be careful, because what you want, because if you go with your terms, you're going to get what you deserve. You'll get the box that you'll get as much that fits into your terms, and that's it. You won't get the real experience. So, this is what Moses discovered, that there are things that you experience directly, and there are things that you experience with Isai, and things you experience with Lo Yiro, through not trying to own it, through not trying to control it. That's when it becomes a reality. But insecure people in a fearful world want to control. It's like the story with Chelam as well. They were looking for the moon, in order to make a blessing on the moon. And the moon, it was cloudy. Then finally the moon came out for a moment. And someone said, look, there's a reflection of the moon in the barrels of water. So another Chalam guy says, listen, let's seal the barrel fast before the moon is lost. They thought that they have the moon in the barrel, that will be it. Little did they know that it's only a reflection. You seal the barrel, you don't have a moon. The most beautiful things in life, you have to allow to own you, not you own them. This comes to truth, love, God, soul, integrity. There's an expression that says, in the Mishnah it says, Shleish Ksarim, there are 3 crowns. The crown of Malchus, the crown of Torah, the crown of Kahuna, the crown of Torah wisdom, crown of priesthood, and the crown of malchus, of kingship. And then it says, V'keser Shem Tov Ola al Gabeim. And the crown of a good name rises above them all. So everyone asks the question, so we have 4 crowns here. Why does it say 3 crowns and then the 4th? And they explain the 4th covered is malchus, dignity. There are things you can get, you can own. You can study Torah and you own a certain amount of knowledge. Obviously, the Torah is arucha meretz midah, and there's always more. But what you know, you know. Malchus, a priesthood, a kohen is a kohen. It's his birthright. Passes on to the next 2 children. You don't even make any effort involved. Malchus is the same. But there are things that don't come to you. You can't go and buy a good name anywhere. It doesn't come to you through inheritance. Your father could have, a mother could have good name, and that's not really pass on to you. You have to earn it. You can't say, hey, my parents had a good name, trust me. Maybe you'll get the benefit of the doubt one time, but not if you don't earn it, or if you betray it. So things that are like a good name, dignity, the real things we value, far more than wisdom, far more than kahuna and malchus, that rises above them all. It needs the other 3 to rise, because it doesn't have on its own. It's like malchus, less law, it doesn't have any light of its own, like the moon. It doesn't have light of its own. But when it is humble, the light that the moon gives off is far different than the sunlight. We don't see moonlight as just mirror image of the sun. Look, 2 people who are in love, you'll never see them staring at the sun. You'll see them gazing at the moon. The moon has its own haunting pale, has its own type of message. So there are things in life you get directly, there are things you get indirectly. By doing the right thing, suddenly you have that name, the credibility, the reputation, a good name. People see you, they know this person you can trust. Now obviously some people try to buy trust and they this and that, but I'm talking about the real thing. And the same is with dignity, and the same thing is with love. But because we live in a control freak world, or we are sometimes ourselves, which is a direct usually result of insecurity, fears, that's why we need so much control. So therefore we try to own things that are not ownable. I think about this every time I go to a shiva call and I see, and everyone knows this, it's such a given thing. Nobody has yet mastered the art of taking anything that you built in the material world with you to the next world. Nobody. The pharaohs of old, they tried their own way to bury their families with them, but you cannot bridge. Nobody can take matter into a world of spirit. And yet we worship this material world as if there's nothing more. But everyone knows it's limited. What is it, 100 years? 50 years? Because we're so seduced by this material world, we don't really realize. And we're blinded. We're blinded. And we live in a world of acquisition and ownership. And I'm not taking away that, I'm not saying you should give away everything you own, but the point is not to worship it. Worship it is the mistake. You're worshiping artificiality, impermanence, and worshiping the temporary, the impermanent. What Moses was being taught by God in the most subtle way was, you want the real things in life, you have to learn to not try to own it, control it. And then you begin to become a part of it. And then you can see me and live. Because you've given up that need to control and own, and that's what allows it in. That's what allows that higher reality in. And you don't get burned then. You get burned when you're there. When your identity is there, when your personality is there. And this can't be fooled. This you cannot fool. So even on a level of relationships, as I said, we could reach this level, but this requires fundamental bittul. That key word that I often use, bittul. That fundamental ability to suspend yourself. Not to annihilate yourself, not to destroy anything, God forbid, but to suspend your way of looking at things. And when you're able to do that, then other things can enter. There's no way that you can get a new piece of information, a new way of looking at something, if you still maintain your old way of looking. How are you going to get that exactly? It's like saying, give me the new perspective and I'm going to fit it into my old perspective. That doesn't work. You have to suspend that old perspective, hear a new perspective. If you don't trust it yet, at least listen. And then see, then compare. Compare, here's my old perspective, here's my new one. What'd you lose? If you're so confident, it should withstand the challenge, and you'll say, you know what, the old new perspective is not good as my own old one. Obviously barring our subjectivity and investment in maintaining the status quo. But if you're a really honest person, why not? Let me hear another opinion. What's wrong with that? But it's not easy for us. Because why? Because deep down we may think, we know that maybe my opinion is not necessarily, it's good for me because I'm comfortable there. I don't necessarily want to hear another opinion. And maybe I will be convinced, and that I also don't want. Whatever other things we go through. And I'm not suggesting that it's easy. But it's doable. And you have here a tremendous, tremendous lesson. Which is why we're told the story. So Moses asked the question, of course he understood that no person can live and see God in that literal sense. That's not what he was talking about. He was talking about going deeper and having that, and living, and coming back to tell about it. He wanted to have that connection. And God's response was not rubbing it in my face, you can't say. You could see it, but you can only see it by not looking on your terms. I'm trying to find examples for this. One example I can give a little from my own life. When you think about writing, or especially the years that I spent memorizing, hearing the Rebbe's words, and this was hours on Shabbos and holidays, no notes were taken, no tape recorders, the ability to just retain and absorb another person's ideas, and then not just repeat in 2 minutes, but repeat 6-7 hours, and then more than that, put it on paper. That should be a cohesive structure, like writing a book based on memory. Try it out. Try out 5 minutes of someone doing that. The art of doing that really was all about giving up your own perspective. Because as long as you kept your own perspective, there's no way you could hear someone else speak altogether. You hear bits and pieces. And this was a tremendous art, and I say it also as a writer. When they say writers, many will tell you, or artists in different ways, performers, they'll say there's a time when you're in the zone, which means you're so absorbed by what you're doing, you don't even feel that you're doing it. And as soon as you start feeling it, the magic is lost. And it doesn't happen automatically. You can sit for hours and hours and not achieve that level, and then sometimes it just emerges. When you're trained, what you do is you know how to set this environment up in a way that often that state will emerge, but it doesn't always happen. It's not automatic. And it can be very frustrating. And the zone means you suddenly become like a channel for something else. It's expressing itself through you. And you forget you're tired or hungry or whatever it may be. And then suddenly when you become conscious, you realize, hey. So it's almost like with the subject and the object all meld into one. You don't even feel you're experiencing it. I'm sure all of you have had examples of this. It could happen in many different situations. But they don't happen all the time. Because we are basically duality. We are entities of duality, meaning we have me and my experience. Now I'm hungry, I'm now going to eat. But then there are moments where you become so much part of the experience that you cannot distinguish between you and the experience. It becomes a state of being. It's not that you're making love or that you're acting lovingly, it's that you are love. It's not just you going into water and becoming wet, you become water. It's not just you know something, but you become knowledge. And that is only possible on this higher level. To see something, to see the back, to understand God, God is teaching him Torah, so God is God, the teacher, here's the student. Student is hearing the Torah of the teacher. Okay. You'll understand as much as you can understand. But if you want to connect the teacher and student in a level that is their core essence, it's a whole different type of connection. It's not I'm hearing an idea, it's I suspend my tools of understanding, and I just absorb. It's like you completely melt into the idea. You ever read a book? You're completely absorbed in the book. You don't even realize you're turning pages. You don't even realize you're reading words. Think of it, it's like almost a miracle. Here's a page. You look at the page from a distance, it's just words, black ink on a white paper. Then suddenly you start reading it, and the story takes over, and it's just turning pages. What's happening? You no longer even realize you're reading a book. The experiences have so touched you, you're like completely consumed by it. There's just small examples of the idea here. And then it emerges, not you acquire it. If you stop for a moment and say, what am I reading? You lose the moment. And this happens many different ways. But again, this goes back to my opening statement. We are so accustomed to bad habits in how we listen, how we absorb, how we process. Very, very bad habits that don't allow us to really access these tools. requires a whole remake of our entire tool chest of how we hear information, absorb information, process information. Obviously, there's a lot to do with our emotional spine and strength to be able to hear different ideas, to absorb, and so on. And it's a different world. We don't live in such a world with not our education system, our school system, the media, the newspapers. They're feeding into the lowest common denominator, shallowness, 5 seconds, 7 a second attention span, 20-second attention span. And they keep telling us, every time I'm told this, it makes me cringe. But I understand. They say you can't speak more than 20 seconds. This class has gone over 20 seconds. I've already broken the rules, so I might as well, people's attention span. And the truth is, I understand what they're saying, and I know what they mean. And it's true, if you can't get someone's attention in 20 seconds, you're not going to get it in 20 hours. So we understand that there's an importance of getting someone's attention. But I also am very disturbed because I don't want to buy into that human beings are that shallow. And I've seen people can get absorbed into something that they're interested in, even with ADD and all the other today's diagnoses that everybody's diagnosed. Once was called laziness or just plain undisciplined. And with ADD and low attention spans, I've seen people when it was negated to them, when it's important to them, suddenly they had hours for it. I've seen this many times. What I just described, this absorption in a book, in ideas, in, let's say, listening to the Rebbe, I've seen it in casinos. I saw people who don't even know the clock is, there's no clocks there altogether. And they can just sit and play blackjack or roulette or whatever it is, and you ask them, they're so into it. But what are they into? They become absorbed in the lowest common denominator again. So when people find interest, it's not because it's easy to do, it's because when you find it's relevant to you, you'll suddenly have time for it. So though I'm ready to say, of course, yes, in a world like ours where you're competing with 5-second attention spans, the only way to get in is you better get their attention quickly. I understand that importance. But that's igniting. But I totally am confident that people have a lot more in them. And if you really have something to say, and you can that people will be absorbed. How do you balance the two? How do you get their attention to listen for the longer period? That's another story. So you really need the best of both worlds. You need to get their quick attention to be able to get their long-term attention. Let's put it that way. I think that may be the key formula. So, like the story, they say the story with that donkey, the advertisement in the classifieds. The guy says, "I have a donkey. He carries heavy weights and burdens." And even though donkeys are known to be very, very obstinate, this donkey, whoever owns the donkey cooperates with. Anyway, the guy buys the donkey for $1,000. He loads it up, starts walking with the donkey. Donkey won't move. He says to the donkey, "I'm your owner now, and you're supposed to be moving." The donkey just snorts or whatever it is, does not react. He runs back to the previous owner and says, "I want my money back. You fooled me." This donkey does not listen to its owner. He says, "What'd you do?" He says, "I ordered it. I yelled at it. I spoke nicely to it. It won't move." She says, "No. The first thing you have to do is take a big 2x4 and smack it in its behind. A real smack. That should be like ringing. And then talk to it." She said, "But that's not the deal. What is that? What are you saying? The donkey's not listening." He says, "No, the 2x4 is just to get his attention. Once you get his attention, he listens." That was the point. So the question is, how do you get someone's attention in order for them to listen? Okay, so I'm not here to smack anyone with any 2x4s, and I don't see you as donkeys, but you get the message, you get the idea. You thanking me for that compliment? Well, no, you're an angel. You're an angel. Yeah. So the message is basically that when it comes to someone they find in their interest, I find people can spend a lot of time and they will give you their attention and so on. Unfortunately, as I said, yes, we have bad habits. We've been trained badly. We continuously get more and more spoiled. They keep feeding us with menus that obviously lower and lower the standards. So obviously it gets increasingly difficult to get through the whole clutter. You need to compete. But the fact that remains as well, we are souls and spirits. And no matter how much is blocked out and how many impediments you could cut through. Obviously, in many ways, children again are the best place to go to because they don't have the walls up yet. But it's interesting. Children don't respond to adults really. Look at children playing on the floor, and now you sit down and want to play with them. They don't recognize you. They see it as fake. Like, what are you doing here? Because you really can't be in their mentality as much as you fake it. Which leads me to, I remember once giving a lecture. It was a scientific lecture, science and physics, and it was some deep lecture about some major topic. And there was a bunch of intellectuals in the room. And I say that for contrast purposes, as you'll see in a moment. And then they had, for those that had children, they had babysitters in the other room taking care of the kids. But two kids suddenly wandered into the lecture, making a racket. You know how kids, completely oblivious to me, to the audience. So for around 5 seconds I was insulted, but then I started smiling. What do you mean insult? Like, don't these kids realize that we great intelligent wizards are pontificating about the most important scholarly ideas? What kind of chutzpah is this? Where are their parents? And then, as I said, it took me 5 seconds to catch myself. I didn't say anything. And I smiled and I said to everybody, listen, what do you think about this? You're all scientists here. We're all big thinkers. Here, two little kids walk in. How come they don't value what we're valuing? Are we missing something, or are they missing something? And I said, I submit that we're missing something. Because these are real people. Why? Because that's when I came to the realization. I had an epiphany. I said, you know why? Lectures are not natural. Lectures are not natural. A child in its mother's womb, no one's lecturing it. A child is born, doesn't want to hear lectures. A child responds to heart, care, nurturing, love. That's a child. This idea of getting somebody standing at a lectern in front of 1,000 people, 500 people with a microphone, a lecture is a fabricated artificial reality. That's my new theory that I developed right there when I saw those kids completely oblivious. And I stand by it. But we play our games, adults, we have our games and we got to play. But the truth is, they're much closer to that truth. And if we could only hold on to that, we'd have far more emergence of, as I said, the face than owning it. Children have that experience. When you see children have an epiphany, smile, you see it, the purity. They're not trying to own it. They're not trying to write contracts. You tell the child, you want to own this? Okay, the child doesn't even know what it means. The child doesn't know what a copyright attorney is, or intellectual property, or any type of other ownerships. Child experiences things. They don't have the sophisticated tools that we have. But if we could hold on to some of that childhood innocence, we can reach a place that Moses was promised by God, that you could see me and live, but it can't be you with your adult and sophisticated tools. You have to let go. Letting go. And that's the challenge that we have. So I wish upon everyone the strength to know how to let go. And it's one of the hardest things to do. It's far harder than holding on. Because holding on, you hold on. Letting go is far harder because your inclination, all your tools say, no, you have something valuable. Why would I let go? But that's how it works. You say birds take flight. One of the key things to aerodynamics is that element of letting go. Not trying to own it, they let the wind carry them. And they use their wings to navigate. So may God bless you all to navigate properly, to take flight. And always remember there are things we can control on a superficial and more artificial level, and there are things that the real things control us. But we have to get out of the way. And as long as we're in the way, it cannot carry us. So I hope everybody is able to take that lesson, internalize it, use the right exercises, whether it's through prayer or study, or just learning how to give instead of taking, is ultimately the best way to experience something beyond yourself. To give. To give means you're not hoarding, you're not driven by narcissism. It's the energy that's going out instead of the energy that's holding it in. It's the breathing that's necessary, the exhaling, not just the inhaling. So, with that said, Philip will be giving his class tomorrow night, yes. And as always, it's an honor to share a few words with you all. Hopefully, we can take something from this. No person can see me and live. And we will continue this journey as we do every week. And I invite everybody, as we enter now into the season Passover, I think we have some Omer books. Do we have any? Yeah. So the Omer books are now new season coming. And any other way that we can be of assistance to you, please contact us, email us, call us. And of course, leave us your email address if you haven't done so. And those of you online, meaningfullife.com, you can access us anytime. And as I said, it's an honor to continue this great journey with all of you. Thank you.